The United Nations has described the Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar, whose British embassy is here in central London, as the most persecuted community in the world. Many countries have already called for an end to the violence against them. Britain has strong historical and military ties to Myanmar as the country's former colonial power. Myanmar soldiers have also visited the UK to take part in training exercises paid for by the British government. Now, many British lawmakers and protesters are demanding an end to the violence. Myanmar's security forces have long been attacking Rohingyas and torching their villages since October 2016 in a bid to push them out of the western state of Rakhine. The attacks have increased since August the 25th, with State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi ignoring international demands to call off the operation. Thousands of Rohingyas have already fled their homeland to get to Bangladesh. Many have died in the dangerous boat crossing on the Naf River, which separates the two countries. UK Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson has been urged by over 150 MPs and members of the House of Lords to suspend Britain's training of the armed forces there, given the military offensive against Rohingya Muslim civilians. However, while Johnson called on Aung San Suu Kyi, the acting leader, to stop the violence against Rohingya Muslims, he also praised her as one of the most inspiring figures of our age. Many have expressed anger that Aung San Suu Kyi received a Nobel Peace Prize, which seems in contradiction to current events under her leadership in Myanmar. Should the UK government get tougher on the violence in Myanmar? And how responsible is Britain in actually contributing to the problem? Simple questions with important answers. And let's start with this. What do people here in Britain think about Myanmar's treatment of the Rohingya Muslims? We put that to the public here in London.
Freedom of traveling and all of that is really important. I mean, within reason, obviously, if you're not within the law or something, of course you need to take some actions or something, but as a default, I really don't think any government should be prosecuting anyone, particularly within their own citizens.
Definitely, it's something that the international community should not keep silent about. It has been happening for a while, and I really don't understand why it took that long for the international community to take notice, because it's not a secret. It hasn't been a secret, and it was never a secret. So definitely something should happen. And the fact that the person witnessing this is a Nobel Prize winner for peace, it really doesn't make any sense to me.
Looks like the start of some sort of genocide, from what I understand. I know they're being driven into Bangladesh. I know they're being treated very badly, from what I understand from the media, and it's quite horrifying.
I've seen a small amount in the press. I guess it's been overshadowed with kind of more recent events in London. I think the bit that really resonates with me is the young children. So there's a lot of coverage in terms of the young children being born, I think, in where they're being exiled. And I've got young children myself, so that kind of really cuts across for me, really.
To be honest, I've not read about it in detail or followed it in detail, but the little I've gathered, it's pretty unacceptable.
Why do you say unacceptable?
Just from the human rights violations, targeting a community for just being of a certain race or religion, and just some of the photographs I've seen, which could be fake news, as we call it these days, who knows, but if they aren't fake, from what I've seen, it's pretty horrendous.
It really is horrific that 400,000 people can be driven out of their homes, their homes burned by the Myanmar army, and Aung San Suu Kyi, who is seen to be some form of saint, is keeping extremely quiet. Now, it may be because of the politics of the country she's forced to do that, but it is an enormous human tragedy, and the United Nations have got to try to do something about it.
It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. You know, you would think mankind has come a long way since that, but we haven't. You know, we continue to repeat the mistakes of the past. It's kind of, you know, we're just not treating the citizens of the world in a respectful way.
I mean, it's full-blown genocide. So what you have is just another spike of many spikes that's happened in the last number of years. In fact, the oppression of the Rohingya has been going on for centuries. And really, the same stuff that we're saying now is what we have been saying for 2-3 years ago. And this is just essentially just another sequence, an escalation of violence that's been happening against a defenseless population. So full-blown genocide, that's been happening for a number of years. It's nothing new.
The Myanmar treatment of the Rohingya Muslims is nothing short of ethnic cleansing, genocide, but even those headlines do little to describe the true horrors of what's taking place. There are images and videos circulating on social media of children having their throats slit in front of their families, people being thrown into live fire, buried alive. I mean, this is what a true horror story happening in real life in 2017. It's just that the word shocking does not even just come close to describing what is going on.
Britain provides military aid and training to Myanmar. But given Myanmar's military offensive against Rohingya Muslim civilians, does the British public think this makes the UK and perhaps other Western nations complicit in that violence? We put that to the public.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, to be honest, in general, selling weapons to another country, I kind of have a personal issue against it, whatever is this, whatever is Korea, North Korea, America, whatever. I really don't think we should do that.
Definitely, yes. Any country that is either funding or supporting a government or a military movement that is overtaking this kind of actions, then definitely it's complacent and it's a silent partner.
I think that's a really interesting question. I live near Excel in London, and they had the big arms fair last week, and it really made me feel very uncomfortable actually. And I saw the protesters, what was left of them after they'd all been arrested and taken away, and it really brought up some very difficult questions. And I really thought, really, what are we doing here? We're really enabling this, and we're really quite a big part of it.
Yeah, definitely. I think anyone you're selling arms to, it depends what they're using it for. If they're trying to do it to get profit, they're directly impacting what's happening, really. I think you can't really sell arms to anyone with the intention of thinking, oh, well, just because you sold it, we've made money, doesn't mean you can wash your hands with it. You are directly complicit in whatever happens.
Whenever you sell arms to dictatorship regimes, you are complicit. We've had an arms industry in this country all my lifetime, and we've sold to some of the worst people you can imagine. And we continue to do so on the basis of jobs and the economy. But we must start to look at that and say, what can we do to move away from arms sales, especially to dictators of the type that are in Myanmar now?
Well, I'm a Yank, so we should accept some responsibility also what we do in our part, and I think also Brits should do that. Sometimes best intentions lead to very dire consequences. This is probably one of the cases. So I think usually the UK goes in with very good intentions, but sometimes things get more complicated and they turn out to be very bad.
No, of course, because the same military tactics are being used against a defenseless population, and as a consequence, the relationships that Britain has. The Britain's not using those relationships to essentially pressure Burma. They could easily take away and sanction those that advice, that support, and that relationship, but they're choosing not to, and that speaks volumes in itself.
Britain training people or supplying arms to people who are engaged in human rights breaches is an ongoing story which has to stop. To train those people that are committing these horrors, these murders, these acts of genocide and ethnic cleansing makes you nothing short of complicit. And it's not the first time that a critique has been raised of the British government in this regard, because we have, of course, just recently in the general election, had many critiques raised about the supply of arms to Saudi Arabia and similarly supporting other wars and arms around the world.
Boris Johnson called on Aung San Suu Kyi, essentially the Myanmar Prime Minister, to stop the violence that has broken out against Rohingya Muslims in the country. But he also praised her as one of the most inspiring figures of our age. What does the public think of his comments? And should Suu Kyi's Nobel Peace Prize be taken back?
Definitely, definitely. And I think there was a call or like a petition for this. And such a statement, to say the least, is provoking. To call a person who is at least witnessing or doing these kind of actions an inspiring figure is provoking to everyone's emotions, whether it's Muslims, whether it's the Rohingya people themselves. So this is an uncalled for statement, in my opinion.
I mean, Boris, he always has some interesting things to say, doesn't he? That he's often quite controversial, but it's difficult. It's almost like she's sold out to the military, and I'm not quite sure what's gone on there. I don't think I've got enough knowledge, but it's been very shocking, considering what she supposedly stands for, that this is now going on in the country.
I mean, I think for that reason it should probably be questioned. I don't know whether it means that it should be taken away. I don't know all the facts, but I would definitely question whether she should still have it, yes.
To be honest, I unfortunately don't know enough about why she got the Nobel Peace Prize. I just don't know enough about her direct involvement in what's going on. But say it was to be proven that she is directly involved in what I just said is clearly unacceptable, then I think there's grounds to take that prize away.
I don't know about that. If he's obviously said, if he's praised her for winning it, and then obviously sort of contradicts himself, I think he is just a man of contradiction a lot of the time anyway. But yeah, definitely Nobel Peace Prize is yeah, you can't have anything to do with peace if you're sort of creating that sort of violence or instability in any sort of area. I mean, same, I'd say it with Obama as well. Like, you can't be in charge of a country that sort of has record number of drone strikes and then winning an award for peace. You know, it doesn't ring true.
Boris Johnson's a buffoon, always has been a buffoon, always will be a buffoon. I wouldn't believe a word he said on anything at any time. I think she is in a difficult position, but nevertheless, for somebody who's received the support she's received worldwide while she was under pressure, she should be doing more for these people than she's currently doing.
No, I don't think she should lose a Peace Prize. People make mistakes, and I think people have to have the courage then to sort of see what's really has changed and then maybe make the corrections that are necessary.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the situation, and there's lots of pro-democracy activists that are actually very anti-Rohingya. That narrative has been there for a very long time, and as a consequence, we have to recognise that Aung San Suu Kyi is one of those activists. She always has been. And to think that she can create unity amongst other Burmese ethnics, there's like 125 ethnicities there, or even more, and yet she cannot create unity with the Rohingya. That's absurd. So she's deliberately taken a line that's trying to essentially make it easier for her to claim to power. That's not something that we should really celebrate as a champion of peace. In fact, quite the opposite.
The fact that she was given a Nobel Peace Prize and then to act in the way she has is a complete contradiction in itself. Boris Johnson's comments in those regards demonstrate that. But on one note, we have somebody who is being celebrated around the world for surviving horrors herself, and rightly at that time being awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. But the question now is, should that person still continue to hold such a title? I mean, what is different to what she is doing to what Hitler did or any other dictator or a murderer on a mass scale that has done historically? You know, for someone like that to continue to hold a Nobel Peace Prize goes against the grain of what that Peace Prize stands for, and begs the question as what credibility is left of that Nobel Peace Prize if people like this continue to hold that title.
The UK has sold over £500,000 worth of weapons to the Myanmar government in the last 3 years. They also provided an estimated £300,000 in military aid to the nation. At the same time, 400,000 Rohingya have already fled the country to seek safety in Bangladesh. Recently, members of the UK Parliament asked Theresa May's cabinet to step forward and help end the violence, which they described as ethnic cleansing. What does the public here in the UK think the government should do? For example, perhaps take a tougher stance.
Absolutely. I think we should use whatever is at our force, and particularly the resources that Britain has as a country, to make sure that we kind of create a safe environment for everyone, whatever is here or outside or any kind of country related to Britain, in the former related to Britain or currently. Absolutely.
Yes, definitely. And the UK, the US have been well known to intervene in these kind of, let's say, situations. So it's beyond me why they are still being soft and they did not act like they acted in Iraq or Afghanistan, for instance. Just because it's a small country or it has no economical benefit to the UK and the US doesn't make it try to stay silent or to be soft.
Yes, I do, but it's very difficult because then obviously getting drawn in terms of military, I think is a very difficult question, and what implications that has in terms of resources and also for our military themselves.
Well, yeah, I guess at the moment there's obviously a question of, are we taking a tougher stance? So again, I think it should be questioned and the right people should debate it. But yeah, it seems that there should be grounds for that, yeah.
Well, again, if the facts are what I said they could be, the unacceptable stuff going on, then I think absolutely, I think it's not just her, but the entire world community needs to step up and do something about this.
Oh, I would be very pleased to see Theresa May get tough. I'd be pleased to see Theresa May give leadership on any issue since she's been Prime Minister. So I can't see it happening, but I would be pleased if she did.
Obviously, I do support any pressure on any government in the world to essentially stop genocide. Nobody who has in the right mind should allow masses of people to be massacred just because of who they are. But when you look at the establishment, generally when you look at the last couple of 100 years, has Britain really taken the ethical side over its own interest? No. And Theresa May is essentially a reflection of that. And we have to also recognise that Theresa May herself, she has a record of Home Secretary of enacting the same sort of rhetoric that we've seen in Burma, the same Islamophobia that's being repeated amongst the press that the Prime Minister herself now has repeated on some occasions, and these are the same sort of sentiments that's leading towards genocide now in Rohingya. So when you look at Theresa May as a person that's going to try and essentially pressure someone who she may largely agree with, no, I don't think that's going to happen, and I think the people inside Parliament need to recognise that.
Personally, intervention historically has always had issues because innocent people always do get caught up. But the fact of the matter is this: we cannot have one rule for one and another rule for another. We have seen the British government and other governments around the world intervening, as they say, in many situations, and people are killed, innocent lives are lost. But in those situations, we have seen very little credibility or justification for intervention compared to this. If ever there was a justification for intervention, then if this has to be it. This is a situation where without intervention, from a financial perspective, from an international perspective, even from an arms perspective, very little justice is going to be secured for those people that are suffering.
What should the world do to help end the violence against Rohingya Muslims? Here's what the British public said.
Absolutely. I really don't think it's Britain, it's the US, it's anyone. I mean, I had the comment about North Korea earlier. It's just, there's already enough stability as we go to actually add any of this that comes from political parties, like second thoughts that they have looking into the next election and things like that. And to be honest, we should all really be a bit more united.
Definitely, they have a responsibility, but the problem is, again, it's a small country with no economical benefit. In my opinion, if they had oil or petrol, the situation would have been different.
I think they should. And what I found really horrifying about that whole massive arms fair, and it was huge, it really was huge, was that we've got all this sophistication to create all of these weapons of mass destruction, but yet we can't seem to settle our differences peacefully. We have to involve killing people. Still at this stage in our evolution, it just seems crazy.
Yeah, I think there's lots of different forums where clearly people that have got the power to make these decisions should come together, so it should be debated, yeah.
I suppose there's different things the world does in these moments. There's obviously United Nations pressure, there's economic sanctions, there's actually putting United Nations troops on the grounds there to protect the Rohingyas. There's a whole range of tools they can use, I suppose, and start off with what's most effective and immediate, and then build up as is required.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you've got that amount of people, I mean, even if it was 40 people being displaced, you know what I mean, you still got to take action, because if they've not learned anything from the likes of Syria and all that, is that if you leave that sort of thing, it will just grow into something else. Other sort of like factions will take control, like ISIS and all of them people can wherever there's this destabilised position, they'll just come in and it becomes a hotbed, really, doesn't it?
Well, I think we've got to do something to help Bangladesh, one of the poorest countries in the world, who are now trying to cope with this mass immigration. Surely the United Nations, UNHCR, should be in there with short-term accommodation and with food and supplies and try to and health stuff as well, to help these horrendously difficult situations.
If I had the answer, maybe I'd run for government, but I don't have the answer.
Well, there has to be mass sanctions, and there has to be mass, across the whole world, a global consensus that genocide is wrong, human life is precious, and whatever resources, whatever leverage Burma has over China or over the West, it does not matter. And that can only happen when there's a global consensus. That means that China or other nations cannot use, the leverage that they have over Burma the other way around. Burma cannot use the leverage they have over other nations because of various relationships. And it's actually seen as diplomatically bad for other nations to essentially allow Burma to keep on doing this. But we have to see bigger nations that are, for example, South Africa, Brazil, and other like Iran and Turkey and so on. There has to be a general consensus around the world, and this has to happen quickly. We cannot wait for another spike to happen in the next coming years, and this has been going for a good number of years, and if we don't see anything happening soon, then we will see even more killings, more beheading of children, more villages being burnt.
The world should stand shoulder to shoulder against injustice, atrocities and war, particularly in this situation. The world should come together and say, no, we are not going to accept this. We are not going to trade with you. We are not going to talk to you. We are not going to do anything with you. And in actual fact, place embargoes on that country until they stop committing these human rights violations, genocide, ethnic cleansing. And really, if need be, the world needs to step in together as one on that government, on that country, and bring a stop to all of this.
Members of UK Parliament have asked Prime Minister Theresa May's cabinet to step forward and help end the violence in Myanmar, which they describe as ethnic cleansing. Yet there remains a conflict between words of warning about the violence and words of praise for the acting leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who decided not to attend the United Nations General Assembly. The UK's relationship with Myanmar is complex. On the one hand, Britain says it supports oppressed people. On the other, the UK praises those responsible for oppression. And yes, once again, the UK seems conflicted in claiming to be a champion of freedom at the same time as supporting leaders of a state directly responsible for oppressing its own citizens. To genuine human rights campaigners, quite frankly, it doesn't look good.